There's been a lot of discussion. We had our initial standard called FIPS 199, had the 3 impact levels of an information system and all the information. And that was done in order to prevent people from having to go to the high watermark and protect every system with the best controls around. We could never do that, not enough time, money, or energy. So there's always the problem about deciding which of your assets are more important and where that information, where the data is being stored, processed, and transmitted. The theory we have right now is that every one of those categorizations will then drive a set of controls appropriate for that system. That's the first part of the problem. But then there's the connectivity issue you bring up, and it's always incumbent upon the higher side system to make sure they are well protected from any other systems that are coming in or interacting with that system. So you've got a security interconnection agreement, usually between system owners, that will control some of the traffic, how the traffic goes through, what protections are being provided on both sides. But there still is that transitivity problem that exists today. In fact, many of the attacks take advantage of weak systems to kind of make their way to the prime target. And we see that with botnets all the time and other types of things where you're corralling availability of computers that are just pretty much unprotected, and you're using those as jump-off points. So mainframe computers, a good example. Those are largely being ignored in many cases today. We're all focusing on workstations and BlackBerries and all these things. Our mainframes still play a big role in a lot of our areas, and there are good configuration settings for those types of systems. You've got to look in all directions to really do a good job.
So, I agree with Ron. I think the question is an excellent question. And really, I think in many cases, as we are trying to look at this now, just from the Army enterprise, is basically trying to do an analysis of defense depth, trying to ascertain within our systems and our architecture where, in fact, do we build, if you will, the additional defenses. Because it is about, as I said, it's all about the data, but in many cases, there's got to be, and I think this was discussed by Sam, Ron, Sonny, I mean, everybody's talked about it. You got to have some balance here, even in an operational context. I will tell you today, when we have discussions with our senior warfighters, our leaders over there in the AOR, we're now into a process right now with something called the Afghan Mission Network, essentially providing an ability for our coalition partners to have exposure to data and use of our applications in terms of our battle command applications. And so we are basically taking an enormous amount of risk to do that, but from an operational standpoint, you're now getting our partners who are essentially fighting side by side, functioning on the same common operating picture. So the assessment that's basically taking place as we build this capability out there is such that we are trying to figure out, okay, where are the absolute red lines? And oh, by the way, putting some defense in depth. But it all goes back to, in my opinion, at some point in time, balancing the operational context in terms of the performance of what you're trying to achieve to the security piece. Some of that information in many cases is perishable. So whether you lose it or you don't lose it, or it basically gets compromised, okay, maybe that risk to the operation is not all that significant. But that it is just basically an operational evaluation of your architecture, your systems, the way you're using that data. In many cases, a similar fashion in terms of how we conduct just kinetic combat operations, assessing what the risk of the enemy might be and what he might be able to do. But that is a constant debate and a constant discussion that takes place across everything we do, and specifically in terms of IT deployed into the AOR.
I would just add that one of the things in my points regarding the extended neighborhood watch area is exactly that issue. So for example, Interior Department, a couple of times you may think we're just a sleepy little department or agency, and we actually do a lot of things in terms of watching, and so our responsibility is just as much as anyone else's to report some issues. So we work with the CERC, which is the Computer Incident Response Center, and make sure that if there are some issues that come in, that it's our collective responsibility to work together and say, hey, here's what's going on. And if we find some stuff, and we did, which no one in the government found first, and so we immediately brought it up in some instances, or in other instances someone else told us, because we were, so that whole coordination is a joint responsibility of everybody to bring in, and if you do that, it'll get stronger. And to Dr. Ross's point as well, that knowledge base is really important, the best practices, because all of us don't want to reinvent the wheel. Believe it or not, we really don't. You know, we really want to just say, if someone says, hey, you know what, because that desktop initiative or the federal desktop configuration or the thumb drive, we are just as susceptible because they may be using us as a platform to go somewhere else. So that whole aspect of neighborhood watch, continuous monitoring, And the fact that we do countermeasures and keep improving really is the focus. So I think that intelligence connecting the dots is really an important area.